Welcome to Specific Lab. Today I'm going to show you how to make this awesome candy dispenser that looks great and works great too. For this project, I tried designing this on a computer first, and I'm glad I did. There were a few bad designs I had to work through to get to the project you see here. For this project, I only needed a single 1x6x6 board. Now the top and bottom pieces needed to be 12 inches, so I cut the first and used it as a template to cut the second. And even with this newer miter saw, I still had to cut the end of the first piece. I then cut out the sideboards to 5.5 inches. Unfortunately with this wood, there was a bunch of splinters, so it will need some extra sanding later. I next cut the center pieces to 1 3/4. There are 2 of these. I then cut one more board at 9.5 inches. This will be the support board for the drawers. I then pulled out an old table saw that my father had given me. I'm still getting used to the proper safety guidelines and need some extra pieces for this, but it was the only tool I could think of to cut a long 2-inch board for the drawers. I then cut each of the drawers to 6.25 inches. Moving back to the top, I measured from the front edge inward and marked 2.25 inches. I then used a straight edge to draw a line across the top. I next made a mark at 2.25, 6, and 2.25 inches. These would be the centers of the jar lids. I then clamped the board down, drilled a pilot hole, and using a 3-inch hole saw, I created the openings for each of the lids. A hole saw can make a clean cut if it has a backing board to prevent blowout. Each of the jars fit great. Moving back to the drawers, I measured each of them for a dispensing hole. These holes needed to be 1 3/4 inches from the front of each. I then drilled a pilot hole and used a 1.25 inch Forstner bit. I then sanded all of the wood to remove as many splinters as possible. It was now time to create a stopping peg so the drawers would not pull all the way out. On the bottom rear of each drawer, I measured in 1/2 inch. Using a 1/4 inch bit, I drilled about 1/2 inch deep to create a solid pocket to insert a 1/4 inch dowel rod. I measured and trimmed the dowel so that it slightly protruded out of the hole and glued it in place. Measuring and marking the locations of each drawer's dowel on the support plate, I took the plate over to my router table. I made this table in a previous video. I will put the link to it in the description. I also marked a stopping point on the supporting plate to keep from going too deep at 2 3/4 inches. On the router, I used a 3/8 inch bit to cut a nice straight groove to guide each drawer. I then had to sand down the entire board, paying extra attention to the grooves. I then clamped the spacer pieces to the support plate with the intention of screwing them in place until this happened. So instead, I decided to glue them in place, which worked great. Now for the knobs, I chose some basic pieces with a large base. The base will act as a stopper when closing the drawers. To attach the knobs, I picked up some hanger bolts. Here's a great tip. If you ever tried to attach hanger bolt to a knob, first clamp it in between 2 pieces of wood. This will prevent spinning or hurting your fingers. To drill the hole in the drawer, I grabbed a 9/64 inch bit and then screwed in the knob. Moving back to the top board of the dispenser, I took it to the router table for some edge treatment. It created a nice beveled edge, but it did burn some of the wood. This can be covered up later with stain. I then clamped the side pieces in place and used my nail gun to secure them. I then positioned the support board and nailed it too. Next I added some glue on the sides and spacers to hold the top board together. I also added some weight to the top until the glue took hold. For the jar lids, I chose a 2-part epoxy. This seemed like a great idea, but the rigidness proved to be an issue later. The ending result was a great looking candy dispenser. So it was now time to give it some use. So I grabbed some M&Ms, cashews, and jelly beans. I filled each of the jars, turned the dispenser on its back, and screwed each one into place. A quick test showed it was a success. Now I hope you enjoyed how we made this candy dispenser. It looks really good and the family loves it. Now there is one upgrade I would change if I was to do this all over again. Instead of using the epoxy, I'd actually use a hot glue gun. One, it gives it a little more a rubbery effect too, and it's less likely to break loose if you bump them too hard, which I found out in this middle one. You bump it too hard, it will come loose. And so I'm gonna have to go back and touch it up with the hot glue gun. Now if you enjoyed this project, make sure you click the like button, tell us what you think about it in the comments, and as always, have fun building.